Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
What is a wraparound environment and why does it matter? Hello, Mitaki Api. Welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School's campus. I'm Scott Wooster, today's Hochoka host. We're glad you joined our circle for part one of a three-part series on the counseling services at St. Joseph's Indian School. And today we're talking with Robyn Knecht, who's the Director of Counseling Services. Robyn's here to discuss the role that counseling services plays in the Circle of Care, which is our approach to student care at St. Joseph's Indian School. As a staff member in the Counseling Services Department, a warm Hochoka welcome to my boss, Robyn Knecht.
Hello, Scott.
It's good to have you here in Hochoka today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I know a lot about you. We've worked together for how many years now?
18.
Okay. Can you let our viewers know just a little bit about who you are and what you do here?
Absolutely. So I started here in 2004 as a family service counselor, and in that role I worked with first through sixth grade boys. From there I transitioned to the high school girls and then moved into a residential role as a residential coordinator for several years. And for the past 6 years I've been back in the counseling department as the Director of Counseling Services.
Okay. And one of the really neat things about our department that I'm a part of is that we are very child-centered. And so here at St. Joe's, we have a circle of care model. And at the very center, at the heart of that circle of care model is the child. Can you tell us a little bit in our department, the counseling department, how do we live out the philosophy of that child-centered model?
Yeah, so with child-centered, really the focus is when you are working with a child, what does that child need to be successful? And that's where we get to come in and be advocates and really look at what areas can we help fulfill and what areas is the student doing well in and what areas maybe that they're struggling in. And we get to pull all the other departments together to try and meet those needs. And so the counselors have a really unique role being able to work with the teachers and the house parents and the families. And we can really take that full approach to figure out how we can best serve our students.
So the kid's in the center, and we're sort of in the center with them, managing the circle around them, correct?
Yes. Yep.
So you have the circle of care, which has the 6 areas of care, and in a separate podcast we talk about that with Jenny Rennermeyer. Can you explain, there's so much that goes on in that department. Can you explain some of the services that we have in that department?
Yes, absolutely. So in the counseling department, we're able to provide individual counseling, group counseling. We work with students in times of grief. We work with students in times of great success and happiness. We really get to be part of the students' lives and get to know the families at that deeper level to really become one with what the family is doing at home. And we support that here on campus with our students. And so we really kind of get that whole big picture and how we can meet the needs of families and students every day.
Right. That's a thumbnail sketch, right? Because you're talking about individual, group counseling, family contact, that type of thing.
Yep.
What else happens up there?
Okay.
I mean, there's a
there's
million
a ton,
things
yes.
that happen in our department, and it's continually evolving too. So
For being in a rural area in South Dakota, we really are so fortunate with the services we're able to provide a student. We have 10 master level counselors. We also do psychological testing as well as psychiatric appointments, and we have providers that we contract with to come and do those services. We are able to meet the needs mental health wise of students in a very quick fashion. I always kind of refer to St. Joe's as not the real world, because in the real world, to get those types of services, you could be waiting for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to get into a provider. We can do it in as little as a week. And so we're really able to meet that mental health component with all of our students on campus.
right, we're spoiled.
Yes, absolutely.
We are just we have a lot of resources in our department. And so our kids, fortunately, are able to use a lot of different mental health services, and they get them in a timely fashion. And it is unheard of for what you're saying, to have that many advanced degree counselors in a department, plus that kind of access to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. it's really state of the art might not be the right word for it, but
close, yeah.
but it is that kind of thing. It's just a high level services that we're able to provide there. And there's still a couple other things there too that you haven't mentioned too. Drug and alcohol services.
Yep.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. We also have a drug and alcohol counselor that's able to provide assessments with students. She also can do education, intensive outpatient services, and then refer to drug and alcohol treatment if needed for a student. She's been able to implement those assessments in as little as a week, which again blows the timeline out of the water for other areas. An example that I like to give is when you think of a public school setting and a counselor within that setting may have 300-400 students that they're trying to manage and work with. A clinic, you may have a caseload of 50-60 on your caseload, where at St. Joe's our max is 24, and that's your caseload that has the most. And so a majority of our counselors are right in the 20 for numbers. And so being able to really provide whatever service that child needs is our strength in our department, and something that, we feel very strongly that we need to do and maintain that. And so that's a wonderful service we can provide.
Right. We almost take it for granted up there too.
Yeah.
You're because you're in it. You're just busy doing the job every day. And the newest part of that of the department too, just in the last few years, which you're a big part of, and we will talk about or in a different podcast, but just real quick.
We've started an equine therapy program and are currently building an equine therapy center so we can offer services year-round. We have 7 horses on campus that live on campus, and we're hoping by the end of it that we'll have 10 horses that we can have. Patty is a wonderful addition to our department. She does great work with the horses and students, but it's just a way for students to connect at a different level on processing emotions, but also connecting to their culture. And so that's been a very exciting adventure that we've all been on and have learned more about, and see the benefits of keeping that strong on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the number of counselors, and you mentioned that the size of our caseload. So St. Joe's has roughly how many students at the school right now? 180, 200?
196, I believe, is the number today.
Okay. So who's using the services? How many of those kids?
196.
Yeah, right? They are.
They are. And so the cool thing is not every student needs to jump into intensive counseling or therapy from day one.
I agree.
And so it's really unique that we can assess how a student's doing. We meet the student where they're at, and if they need those extensive services, we can provide them. If they just need a sounding board and a place to check in with somebody, we provide that too. So every student gets a counselor when they come to campus. The beauty of this, I think, has lasting impacts as far as trying to reduce the stigma of mental health. Students learn who we are. They spend time with us. Sometimes they don't even view us as counselors, which is fun. But what we're seeing is when students leave, they will call and say, hey, I need to find a counselor like you, and how do I do that? And that is a wonderful benefit that I think we're providing students and families to show the importance of it's okay to go to a counselor. It's okay to process those things. But of that 196, we have roughly 130 that are in the intensive services. And so many utilize our services in that capacity. But any student can come to a counselor's office. You have students that come and check in and hang out and get to know you. The benefits of that is if something comes up in 2 or 3 years, you've already built that relationship. You already have that foundation set with the student, and it's easier than I think for them to open up and share what's bothering them, and you guys can process through that.
Absolutely. And it's a different... I've been here 30 years, and it's not what I was exactly trained for in grad school to do exactly what I'm doing or what we do in the department, because it's a residential school, so that changes the game completely. You know every student intimately, you know their families intimately. Typically, we have a log system where we know what the kids did the night before, what their behaviors were, all those kinds of things. So we're spoiled in that sense, and really it just kind of changes the whole way that traditional counseling is done. sort of. The other piece of that is that we do traditional counseling. We're all trained, and we all work in different modalities of in the clinical world. Can you talk a little bit about some of the different things that we use as therapists on our floor?
Yes, I'm glad that you were talking about how it's different than what we were trained, because we were trained as therapists to be very, I think, individualized as far as the wraparound care wasn't as easy in a clinical setting as it is here.
Not even close.
And I think the reason that it can be that way is because every counselor has the ability to utilize the therapy approaches that work for them. So equine therapy may be an approach that Nicole might use because that connects with her and her student, but it may not be something that Rob would use. And so each of us are able to pick what really resonates with us and resonates with the student in front of us, and can adapt and adjust to that. You said we get the logs, we know the families intimately. That's different also from a clinical setting, but that builds our wraparound services even stronger because we can see the students playing sports, we can see them hanging out in the home, we can see them in the classroom. We really get that full picture of a student and not just that little snapshot. And so being able to have a counselor use what works for them and what works for the student in front of them only builds that stronger relationship and leads to more success with students.
Right. And having a psychologist on staff helps with training too, because we do our group supervisions once a month where we get to be trained in different modalities. Can you speak about a few of those that we might have been trained in, or different things that we do?
A couple of the most recent ones we've been trained in is brain spotting, and Dr. Reimers and I will talk with you about that later. But that's a technique that is used to help with trauma, and students have been receptive to that approach. We've also been trained in the CAMS protocol, which is a suicidality management system, where if a student is struggling with that, now there's a specific protocol that we can follow, and it really digs deeper into what the trigger is for those feelings, those thoughts, those actions. So that's been a successful approach that we've been trained in. We try and have some training every summer that can enhance our skills in what we're doing. Another training we've participated in is the South Dakota Cultural Awareness Training, and that's been beneficial to really, I think, help counselors and even the psychologists incorporate cultural practices more into their sessions. You know, our psychologists, which again I think is a wonderful benefit that we have here, can do prayer ties and smudge and offer those practices for students, and that's been received pretty well. I think also because we're a Catholic organization, we can incorporate prayer into what we do too, which is unique. And so having that ability to figure out what meets the need of that student, it's pretty easy for us to be able to provide what is needed.
True. And the more you say, the more it triggers things with me. So I think outside of my office directly across, there's 2 rooms there. Do you want to mention those?
Sure. We have a play therapy room, and in that play therapy room we have sand tray, a water tray, all different types of toys or activities that students can utilize. We have a therapy swing in that room. A lot of our younger students utilize that room frequently, and it's just another approach that's not sitting in the office talking. You know, it's a deeper approach that unlocks some of that trauma without having to use words. We also have an art therapy room, which a lot of our adolescent girls have been utilizing and making art and creating different ways to express their emotions that again is not verbal. And so we're able to provide those opportunities as well.
And different counselors use different modalities, and you use whichever one fits for a kid. And again, it goes back to what we've tried to craft in that department, which is part of the core, right? So we have the child at the center, the relationship is the center, and whatever builds that relationship between the counselor or the therapist and the child is what we try to do. And that's 100% encouraged on that floor. And I think those benefits are pretty evident with the kids that we work with. Okay, so we talked about the child being at the center of the circle of care. And in the work that I think in the work that I do, I always want to put the child first. And I think as a department, we try to do that. But also a big part of that is also the family is at the center of that too. So we are kind of the hub that connects with the families. We're that central point of contact with the families. And I've always said that over the years, the family gets to be our family. If we're doing our job right, they should trust us. They should understand why they want to send their kids here. They should trust us enough to feel like we're family, that they're sending their kids to a safe place where they can go. And in light of historic multi-generational trauma, that's a big deal. Can you speak to what we do with the families a little bit?
Yes. Okay. So families are so important to what we do here, because if families weren't engaged with us and supporting what we were doing and choosing to have their child come here, we wouldn't be who we are. And so being able to work with a family, and you know this experience, you get to work with a family from maybe 7th grade through 12th grade. So that's 5 years that you get to spend with that family, getting to know them, getting to be part of who they are, learning from them. They're really important to tell us what works for their student and what it doesn't work for their student. Some new counselors that I've worked with, if they come in and say, oh, this parent was really upset and called me and was yelling and really frustrated, I'm like, that's perfect, because that tells me that family feels okay enough with you and that relationship to say, hey, I'm not happy with something, and we get to be the part that says, okay, well, let's figure out what's going to work, and let's try and come up with that. Families are really crucial to what we do and can tell us maybe behavior cues that they're seeing that maybe we're missing, and can help fill that missing piece for us. Our families, they really do become who we are and a part of us. And I've always said, we're able to celebrate grief with families. And I know celebrate's a weird word for that, but that's really part of becoming one with the family you're working with, is that they invite you to those opportunities and can benefit from what we do to support. Families will call in times of need, but they also call and say, hey, we really like what you're doing there, and they're our best advocates. And so partnering with families is something that I think we try and do from day one. From the admissions process, one of the questions Julie does talk about is this a fit for your family? Because it's really got to be a fit for them. And if they don't think it is, then that's okay. We're not for everybody. But our families are really kind of at the center with the child too. And we try and do our best to support families with what they need to help them become part of our family forever. Once they're here, and we want to keep that contact and keep that connection. And I mean, you've worked with families for 30 years that you still talk to and that you're still involved with. And that's the same for many of the counselors and many of the teachers and house parents. But the counselors get that unique ability to build that strong relationship. Just in the month of September, the counselors made over 350 contacts with families, whether it's calling to say, hey, your kid's doing great, or hey, your kid had a rough day, or this is coming up for a meeting, or parent-teacher conferences. We really are able to build those connections through phone, through visits, having families come and visit campus, and we just have that unique setting here to be able to do that.
Yeah. And that's all logged. All the phone calls, all the in-person visits, the emails, the texts, all that stuff is logged, and which is nice. It's nice to have that, but it's such an organic thing. The families have to trust us. We have to trust the families, and again, the families have to be at the center of that. We serve the families, we serve the kids, and if you're not doing that, I always think you're not doing your job right.
Yes, exactly.
So we are expected to do that, and as my boss, obviously, if I'm not doing that, I'm going to get in trouble for it.
There's a conversation.
Yeah, there's a conversation. So which thankfully I've never had. So thank you for the overview of our counseling services department. Again, I do think it's a state-of-the-art department, and it is wonderful to be a part of it. I wouldn't have stayed in that department for 30 years if I didn't love number one what I did, but the people I work with too. So it does continue to evolve. It does every year. And I also thank you for being here in Hochoka too with us to share that about the department. And thank you to our audience, our viewers. Thank you for joining us here in Hochoka at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native American education today. Until next time, with me, stay centered.